Today I'll be bringing you behind the scenes as I begin work on a new score for the film Shelf Life. This film harkens back to those black and white creature feature thriller films from the 60s, and I absolutely love the scores from that era. So my first decision was, what was the instrumentation going to be for this film? Let's take a look at what I chose. Film composers of the 1960s were experimenting with unique combinations of instruments. No one more than the master composer Bernard Herrmann. And to a much lesser degree, I've decided to follow suit here. So if we look at my woodwind section, I have a piccolo, one flute, an alto flute, and this alto flute will be doubling on a C flute. I've got a bass flute, an oboe, English horn, two clarinets, a bass clarinet, a contrabass clarinet, and this instrument will play a large part in the sound of this score. A bassoon and a contrabassoon. Not your typical woodwind section for an orchestra, but for the film, I think I'll be able to combine these instruments and get some very unique colors out of them. Looking at the brass, we have 6 French horns and then 3 trumpets, and you'll notice that I've called them out to be B-flat trumpets. That's because the B-flat trumpet is a little bit darker than the C trumpet that you would usually find in an orchestra, and I think that fits the sound of the film. We've got 2 trombones and then 2 bass trombones. And the reasoning behind that is I want to voice some of the chords in the trombones in that lower register, something that you hear in these films quite often. So that's why I have 2 bass trombones here, and then a tuba to round out the brass. For percussion, I have a timpani, a percussionist playing gong in this cue. I'll probably add a second percussionist, and they'll cover a wide range of instruments. We have a vibes player, and they'll probably also be playing things like xylophone, any kind of mallet instruments. And one of the sounds I'm sure you recognize is this. The theremin. I mean, come on, that's just such a great sound, and it's such a blast to write for. It's a signature sound that's been used in many movies of the 60s era to represent space aliens or some sort of supernatural event. So that's going to be a lot of fun to write for this theremin here. All right, next we have the harp, and then a string section, which is a smaller string section, a studio-sized string section, not a large orchestral-sized string section. Let's take a few minutes now and listen to this first cue of the film and see how these instruments can be combined to get different kinds of unique sounds that evoke that 60s era film score. Writing music in this style is such a blast, and I can't wait to get to the rest of the score. The movie right now is in post-production, but I was able to get this early scene as locked picture just so I could develop the sound of the movie. The director and I talked about different possibilities, and I think this is working really well. Now let's take a look at the harmonic language I'm using, some of the orchestration, and the director was kind enough to let us look at a very short piece of this opening scene just so we could see how the music is working to picture. The main sound that I'm using for this piece is based on a chord that's come to be known as the Hitchcock chord, and it sounds like this. It's called a minor major 7 chord. So on the bottom we have a minor triad and a major 7th on the top. It's got a very unsettling sound. Bernard Herrmann used this in his scores for Alfred Hitchcock movies such as Psycho and Vertigo, and that's why this has become known as the Hitchcock Chord. If we look now in the score, we can see that I've used this minor major 7 chord right from the very beginning to establish that sound. I'm not thinking in the terms of scales or modes, though this could come from harmonic minor or melodic minor. I'm simply thinking of this as a sound that I'm going to use throughout the score. So starting in measure 1, I'm outlining the Hitchcock chord. We've got the C in the bass, we've got a G in the violas being played as a tremolo, and then in the violin 1, we have a harmonic. So that lower note here of this C is the pitch that they're stopping with one finger, and this note that looks like it's in a diamond shape, the F, they're touching that very lightly with another finger. And as they bow, that creates what's called an artificial harmonic, which sounds 2 octaves higher than the C that they're stopping with the first finger. Starting in measure 3, we have another artificial harmonic. This time they're stopping a D and touching a 4th above on the G. And these artificial harmonics are sometimes known as touch 4 artificial harmonics. Let's take a listen to how those harmonics sound just on their own. These harmonics are such a haunting and beautiful sound, and they help to keep the orchestration very light here so that some of the more delicate instruments can be heard. If we look at what the harp and vibraphone are playing, we're outlining a C minor major 7 chord here, and they're outlining those notes in this figure that they play. They've got an extra added 9th with this D. If we go on to measure 3, we're now playing an E flat minor major 7 chord, and the instruments are also outlining that chord. Looking up above, we've got a bass flute and a flute playing this line. Now the bass flute sounds an octave lower than what's written here. So we have these instruments playing in octaves. And then the contrabass clarinet. It adds this low guttural sound to the score. Let's listen to that instrument in isolation. I really love that sound of the contrabass clarinet. It's become a signature sound for this cue, and I'm sure for the entire score. We've also got our theremin playing here. Our bass clarinet comes in bar 4 along with our B-flat clarinet, and we have our alto flute. Let's listen to these first 5 bars and just see how these sounds combine to set a mood. The next thing I'd like to look at is starting here in bar 6, where we have these quick lines and then a big hit. And if we look up top, we can see that these time code markers tell us exactly what's happening here. So here it says that axe hit 1 happens here, so the impact of an axe hitting happens right at this moment. Here's the second impact of the axe. And here it says fridge hit, and this is a fridge door closing right at this moment. These quick running lines that move upward are the swing of the axe, and this is the swing of the refrigerator door. So how does this go together, the swing of an axe and the impact of an axe and the closing of a refrigerator door? Well, there's a very interesting idea that's happening here. We've got on a screen in the room an old movie playing. It's called The Last Man on Earth. And I'm rescoring that movie, not because it's not a great score, it's a great score, but I'm rescoring it because what we're trying to do is tie what's happening on the TV to what's happening in the real world of the movie. So we'll be futzing this score so that it sounds like it's coming from the TV, but it's going to be commenting on both the world of the movie and the world of the film. So it's a very interesting idea. Let's look at the voicings of these hit points. I'm going to zoom in for a closer look at the construction of this voicing. What I'm doing is stacking tritones and perfect fourths to come up with this voicing. So we start with a G in the bass and then move up a tritone to a C sharp. This is actually an octave in a tritone. Here we move from a C sharp up a perfect fourth to an F sharp, then up a tritone from the F sharp to the C, then from the C we move up a perfect fourth now to the F, then now up a tritone from the F to the B natural, then from the B natural to the E is a perfect fourth, then from the E to the B flat is a tritone, then from the B flat to the E flat is a perfect fourth. And we get this voicing. Now everybody is bowing this except for the cellos that are playing what's called a snap pits or Bartok pits. This little symbol indicates that. And what a snap pits is the player will pull the string up high enough so that when they let it go, it actually hits the fingerboard and it makes a very aggressive sound. It sounds like this. They're playing this in divisi, so the section is divided into two playing this. The bass is holding its note throughout these runs. So let's take a listen to what all of this sounds like together, just the strings. Creating this structure of the hit point by stacking tritones and perfect fourths gives it a very open sound. We could have taken those same group of notes and played them like this. And gotten that type of sound, which might be great somewhere else in low brass, but it just shows you that you can take the same group of notes and distribute them different ways and get different sounds. Okay, now let's look at this snippet of music to picture. And I'm just going to play this beginning opening to picture, and then I'll let the rest of the score play without picture. I hope that these ideas were helpful to you, and as I get more of the score to work on, I'll be showing you more behind the scenes. This snippet of picture will play without any sound, so you won't hear the dialogue and sound effects. And remember that the music will eventually be futzed to sound as if it's coming through the TV speakers. Thank you to everyone who's following along, and I'll see you all next time.